I'm Daniel Hines from SteinerBooks, and I'm here today with our author Dennis Klocek to speak with him about his book, The Seer's Handbook. So Dennis, The Seer's Handbook, what's that about?
The Seer's Handbook in my life was the result of several requests from people who were working with a previous book, Seeking Spirit Vision. So Seeking Spirit Vision was one of the first ones I wrote, and it was a long and involved process, and the book got very condensed in the process. And people were intrigued by it, but eventually they said to me, can you do something to kind of do like a Seeking Spirit Vision light? Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, you know, the original theme was seeing, or seership. Why don't I do a handbook for seers? And what that would be kind of a practical aspect of exercises that could be done that would allow a person to understand that they need to transform themselves in order to perceive the world in a different way. And we could say, well, why do you want to perceive the world in a different way? And if you really ask that question, that goes toward the tradition of what is known as mystery wisdom. And Rudolf Steiner's work is based on mystery wisdom, which is that the world as it exists is really a symbol. It's a picture of another level of existence that is much more fluid than the one we see here. And sometimes in the natural world, when you see things changing in the natural world, you kind of get a feeling for that fluidity. But then we have things like rocks and trees that are not perceived to be quite so fluid. And over time, living among rocks and trees and buildings and roads and now infrastructure, we have a tendency to see only the things that have ceased to develop as the reality. And in mystery wisdom, the reality is the thing that makes things change.
Okay.
So if I wish to perceive change and not be upset about it, I need to build in myself something that Rudolf Steiner calls the organ of perception in the heart. He calls it Gemut. Mm-hmm. And that heart organ in us is actually a kind of energetic consciousness of how things are changing. Okay. If I develop that and have a kind of flexibility in my inner life about it, that enables me to live in a world that's of conflicting value. Okay. Of, we could say, alternative fact.
Okay, so how does that look?
And in alternative fact, what that does is it forces a person to choose between this fact and that fact. One of them has to be completely correct and the other one is completely wrong. Okay. And in that world, 51% rules over 49%. Okay. Which leaves 49% kind of disengaged and upset and frustrated. And the powers that be in the world can regulate human consciousness with that. Okay. Through media and whatever. So there needs to be an organ in my heart that can tell, that can see how one thing is changing into another thing and determine whether that change that I see is valid for all time or is just a temporal phenomenon. Okay. And the ability to, and Rudolf Steiner calls that being able to separate out what is eternal from what is temporal. Okay. So
what's the trick to that?
So the Seer's Handbook is a book of exercises and methodologies that develops in the human soul this gemut, this ability to see behind the temporal world the eternal. You could say the spiritual.
Okay.
So the seer sees the eternal aspects of the temporal world. That's what a seer does.
All right. So then ordinary people call them visionaries or something like that.
Well, a visionary is when the image that comes rules the consciousness of the person. And the seer needs to control the image, the inner picture. Then they're called a mage. So a mage is the root of the word image. I mage. I am a mage. Mage is magician. So like the three kings that came to visit Christ were magi. They were people who controlled their inner picture. So the Seer's Handbook is a set of exercises for people that want to learn how to control their inner picture. That's what it was designed to do. So it's a sequel to Seeking Spirit Vision, and Seeking Spirit Vision is the reason why we need to do it. And the Seer's Handbook is, well, if you want to kind of slug through all this stuff, here's maybe a way to develop it.
Great, and I'll ask a similar question to the previous book. So it's been out for a while, people have been reading it, and doubtless a few of them have contacted you. What kind of feedback have you gotten on the book?
Oh, people tell me all the time that they pick it up and then they read it, and then there's a certain section they really like, and then they kind of work with that, and then it grows on them, and they get a certain capacity. And then there's another part that maybe they don't like so much, but then after they get the capacity from the first part that they like, they go, oh, now I see that this part I didn't like was actually covering something in me that I didn't want to deal with. But now that I see at this other level, now I really want to go in and work with that. So it's like an onion.
Right.
So as you start to do this kind of inner work, you're just peeling off layers of belief that are preventing you from actually having something called, Rudolf Steiner called flexibility of soul. Flexibility of soul is, to me, way in the future when dogma and alternative facts and fake news and all the stuff that's driving polarities in today's society. People are going to have flexibility of soul to be able to weigh and hold two conflicting points of view simultaneously without polarizing. It'll be a survival trait for your own sanity in the future. And the mystery teachers have always taught that in the past through the idea of seeing. So seeing is actually the first level. It's the level of imagination. But then there's inspiration and intuition beyond that. But this particular age is called the age of manas. It's the age of the developing of imagination.
Okay.
That's the task of the age. That's why imagination is being attacked so deeply with false images.
Well, this sounds like a powerful book, Dennis.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Thank you for having this conversation with us, and I hope our listeners and viewers will go out and get themselves a copy. This is Dennis Klocek and his book, The Seer's Handbook.